Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you back, or for the first time, to We'll Bring the Popcorn, your favorite film and TV podcast.
On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the new horror film Weapons, as well as the sequel Freakier Friday.
So we're just going to jump right into our reviews this week, and we're starting off with Weapons. So this was a horror film that we've been looking forward to. We've seen a lot about it with the trailers. I think if you've seen anything rated R lately, that you've seen this trailer in front of it. It stars Julia Garner as Justine, a school teacher in a small town who shows up to work one day and her entire classroom but one kid is missing. And so the story follows that of what exactly has happened to these kids. Where are they at, those who are looking for them, but also with how the teachers, the parents, the school, the other kid, the kid that was left, how they're all dealing with this disappearance because no one knows what's going on. And it definitely dives into some dark and disturbing areas as well, but it also does spend plenty of time dissecting different characters to show you how each one deals with hardships and grief and loss, because we know Zach, the director, he lost somebody that inspired him to write this film. So you're kind of seeing probably different aspects that he's either gone through or thought about with this. And it was a really interesting film in the end. It had some dark and disturbing moments. It had some truly creepy moments as well. It had me on the edge of my seat for most of it because I was tensed up, like, okay, what's happening next? What are we going into next with this?
Yeah, and it even had some comedic elements a little bit to it in some slight ways, which I know the internet's kind of taking and kind of running with it. It was like, I didn't know this was a comedy film. It's not really a comedy film if you're paying that much attention to the film, but yeah, it deals with some really dark subjects, and hats off to the marketing team because they showed so little in the trailer that you're like, okay, we think it's going to be this way tonally, and he gives you a bunch of different types of things mixed into this. And what I appreciate about this is, this is a horror film that takes place from the various perspectives of the characters in the film, at least the main ones. And you go through about 6 or 7 different points of view all around this singular event and what's going on with it. And, I like how each character gets a little bit of time to shine, gets a little bit of nuance, has you kind of care about what's going on with each of these people. And you get everybody's perspective on, not only what's going on with them personally, but what is going on around this singular event of these kids disappearing. And, hats off to Julia Garner. I think she did a fantastic job in this, dealing with as the teacher who draws the ire of a lot of parents because they feel like this teacher may have been a witch and is responsible. Like, what are you telling these kids in your classroom? What are you doing? Which is a very real concern that a lot of parents would have in a situation
she's
like
behind
this.
it.
Yeah, like, you didn't disappear, but all these kids did. Why didn't this one kid disappear? Like, a lot of heat comes on the teacher, and she deals with, that through the use of alcohol and, has a, just kind of spirals that way with, dealing with, not only caring about the kids, but dealing with the very real backlash of all of these parents who are coming after you, like wanting answers about their kids that you just don't have an answer for. And they do a fun job of kind of playing with, who's really responsible for these kids going and disappearing and what's the story behind it. And I gotta say, if I had one little minor knock on the film, is that it does kind of semi-go in a predictable way with, the fact that, we got to deal a little bit spoilery here just to kind of talk about the plot of the film. But obviously one of the questions you have right out of the gate is, why is it everybody but this one kid? What does this kid have to do with the disappearance of all of these other kids, and why was this the only one that didn't do it? And they do a good job of jumping around throughout the film to kind of tease a little bit of what's coming. And you get to an end point of a direction that I wasn't exactly thinking it could have been, but I think they do a good job of keeping that bit mysterious most of the way to kind of leave you guessing as to who could potentially be involved in these kids' disappearances. And it goes a little bit predictably, but also not, if that makes sense. Like, it was a really cool way they kind of did it throughout the entire film.
Yeah, because it is a bit of a slow burn. You've got to kind of wait for all the layers and stuff to unravel and be shown and everything, because as you mentioned, it tells it from different perspectives. So you get kind of a narration that opens it up, and then we jump into Justine, because we're basically broken up in chapters where we're going to see it from her perspective up to a point, and then we jump over and we see it from another character up to a point until we get to our final character, which I'm not going to spoil, that at all. But until we get to that one, and that's when it really just starts unraveling everything, and you get to see everything. But yeah, it was really interesting to see, especially like I said, it is about the kids disappearing, but it's more about the adults and how they deal with these situations. Because, you've got the parents attacking the teacher and wanting answers, and you've got Josh Brolin's character Archer. He's the dad of one of the kids from the classroom, and he's dealing it in a way that you've seen people deal with, that he's sleeping in his son's bed, and you can tell there's tension between him and his wife. He's screwing stuff up at work. He's hounding the police every single day on information and where it goes, and he's going to other parents and trying to get information. So he's the guy who just will not let it go, because as a dad, I can see a lot from his perspective. Yeah, my kid's missing. I'm not resting until I find something out. And you get an interesting bit from him, because he is one of the main ones who points the finger directly at Justine to say, all right, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you under arrest or something like this? Why aren't you looking at her more? Because chief of police was like, I see nothing that ties her to it. Well, you're wrong. Like, I looked in her past, she was this and that and this and that. And you get to see so many different kind of characters like that through it. Even one that I didn't expect we were going to look from his perspective, because there's a junkie that's kind of around town that plays parts in many of the stories, mostly with Paul, the police officer story. But we got a perspective from him, which was, that's where we got a little bit more of the comedy. We did almost get slapstick type of comedy at the very end, which I won't lie, it did take me out a little bit of it, because it has a very dark, serious tone. And when we get those comedic moments, again, if this is all about processing loss and grief, a lot of people turn to humor and that. And I can see that his inclusion of humor in there could be because of that, because that's some people, I deal with grief during laughter, but it did take me out a little bit, especially in the more because it was like slapstick and then holy crap moment.
Yeah. It definitely got there by the end, and it definitely shifted some of it tonally once you got to like kind of the reveal as to what was causing this, and but it got very, very dark and gruesome, like very quickly in this when it got to it, and it definitely ratcheted up the intensity when it got there, because you're dealing with different thematic elements. You're dealing with, I can go ahead and feel comfortable saying, like, dealing with like voodoo and different types of, mystical type forces and all that stuff like at play here. And it gets very gruesome and very violent. Like, you have, Benedict Wong is in this movie as the principal as well. And, he does a good job of kind of being that voice of reason as much as he can until he no longer can.
He gets some of the solid, creepier stuff in this film,
he gets some very intense stuff happening when you get to his perspective of events. And it's a really well done horror movie that kind of like knows it's going to be super dark for a good chunk of it. And I think when you flip that switch to some of the comedic elements of it, I do wish they could have incorporated that a little smoother and a little better, because it does kind of just, for lack of a better term, punch you in the face when it turns it on and gets to that portion of it, that it is kind of jarring. And I don't know if that's the effect that he was necessarily going for. It may have been, I can't speak to, the director's full vision of this film, but it does kind of like, holy crap, punch you in the face when it gets to that point of it too, that I'd say the last 5 to 10 minutes of the movie gets a little absurd and almost kind of comedic at that point, while also being very gruesome. And
because you get some horrific moments and scary moments, and then you get that.
Yeah, which the last scene that you really get in that movie is just insane. And it's an intense film, man. Like, I got a lot of enjoyment out of this. I love the perspective storytelling vehicle that they used here, which wasn't what I was expecting going into this at all. I wasn't expecting it to be a multi-chapter, different perspective telling of a story like this. And I'm kind of glad it did it, because I don't think it would have worked had it been just a full linear story necessarily. I like that they came at it from different people's perspectives and slow reveals and how everything was interconnected. I think it was an effective way of telling the story that I think would have been better that is better than what it could have been had it just been a linear type story like that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think it was enjoyable because of that. Like, you get some retreads because of that, but you get to see it while you're looking from this angle. Well, now we're going to look from this angle, and then we're going to step past where we just looked. Yeah. So it's not that it doesn't spend that much time kind of retreading where we were, just enough to say, all right, we're caught back up. We're here. Let's move forward from a different perspective and stuff with it. And yeah, it generally had some really disturbing, creepy moments in it that had me like, I don't know if I want to look at the screen, like I want to look away. And but there was a few issues I had with it, other than there's a few story elements, which without giving away any spoilers with it is hard to talk about. But there are some things that are like foreshadowed or mentioned that actually didn't happen. So I was curious of really what that was about and what they had in there. And there was almost about, let's say we were halfway through the movie, I wasn't sure if we were going to get a full resolution because the way it was going, it didn't, and alluding to those story points that I just talked about, I wasn't sure if we were going to get kind of a big payoff, or it was going to be one where it just kind of like ends and we're left to wonder what happened, but we get basically a full conclusion to it. But it was one that I really wasn't sure we were going to get as I was going through. And there was also a few other times where some of the more graphic elements that we did get a lot of blood, and then other elements you expected to see blood, but there wasn't like anything there that was just like, well, that should be bleeding or that should be doing that. But those are little nitpicky things. Like it was a solid film overall. Like it was really well done. It was, again, it had me on the edge of my seat. It disturbed me. It creeped me out. But I could feel for the teacher because, you know, she's turning to alcohol, as you said, because she doesn't want to deal with the whole town is against her, but she didn't do anything. You get a little bit more about her story, that she's a teacher that cares, but she sometimes oversteps her boundaries, but not in a bad way before we start unraveling your story. And then she's like, okay, you're really stepping over your boundaries now and going too far. And then, you know, you get the kind of typical small town cop in Paul. With Alden was fantastic as him, but he just had enough to show like he's a cop who struggled with alcoholism, and he's got a connection to Justine, and he's got his own problems and other thing that he goes through. But it's still kind of the typical small town cop kind of guy that we've seen in these, you know, small town movies a lot. So like there wasn't a whole lot, but he did like great with it. Yeah, but like there were so many sequences that were just like so creepy and just like so well done. Like it's a really well shot film that gives you some great angles. Josh Brolin was great, as you said. Julia Garner was great. Benedict Wong was great, and like everyone played their parts really well, and it gave you quite a bit of instances of creepiness. But we didn't. I'll say with the kids that it was a core part to the story, but it is more about the adults than the kids themselves. Yeah,
100%. With the exception of, you know, the one kid that makes it that we do spend a lot of time with, and you understand why they're so critical to the overall story. And that kid, man, that was probably the most disturbing part of the movie for me personally, was dealing with that kid's story and, you know, the circumstances he had to deal with. I felt myself like just feeling so terribly for this kid. Like, could you imagine like going in? I have to go more spoilery with this when you reveal that he does kind of have a direct involvement in why these kids are disappearing against his will, really. So there's, without revealing too much, but like he's having to kind of go along with something, and you just put yourself in that situation when you're like, oh my God, this poor kid is being, you know, for lack of a better term, held hostage in a situation like this. And that was probably the most disturbing part of it for me, because you have to see what happens with the kid's parents and, you know, all of the other elements that are involved in, you know, his story in particular. And I'm glad that they kind of waited till further along in the movie, probably 2/3 of the way before you really got his story and his perspective, because that was the meatiest, in my opinion, to what was going on with the actual kids. And like, man, you know, Zach Kreger did an amazing job of telling this kid's story in particular, that, you know, just how would you handle this if you were 8 years old and him being put in a situation like this and just being in absolute fear and just almost just like having your soul taken from you at that point. Because like he kind of goes into this whole like, I'm being forced to do this and I'm just like completely disconnected emotionally. You can just imagine the trauma that's been inflicted on this kid. And it was dark. It was very dark. Like if once you like look at it past the surface level and just see how deep that goes and just having some empathy for that kid. And you're just like, my God, I couldn't imagine. And they just do a phenomenal job of diving into that part of it and, you know, just really feeling for that kid. And my God, man, just that part of the story really had me on the edge of my seat.
Especially like at the end, his sequences where things start unraveling and going, like you're fearful for him and you're worried about him and you're scared about him. And like, as a dad, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go protect that kid and keep him from everything that's going on, especially like as he's being chased. I'm not going to go too deep in the spoilers here, but you've got like the doors being busted and the heads coming through. I'm like, that kid just had to be so terrified during that sequence. Even, I wouldn't even say filming it. The kid probably was a little terrified of what it was, because it got disturbing. I do want to give some props to Amy Madigan, who was Gladys. I'm not going to go too deep into her character, but at first when she's introduced, it's kind of strange and odd and weird, and you're wondering why. But when you really started getting into her and the psychology behind her character and everything she does, it just gets deeper and darker and more messed up and crazy. And you just see the way she commanded in and out of her get up and everything was really just well done on her part.
Yeah, fantastic.
You really hated her, but you also were like, okay, what is she doing next? Like, what is this? And she's also part of that part that we both, from the way we talked, are a little bit less on the last part of her story in there. But overall, like, it was a enjoyable horror film. Like, this is not one for, I don't know, I don't want to say for the weak, but it gets into some dark and serious territories. It gets very graphic. It deals with some hard subject matter and stuff, but I think he did a fantastic job with this film. Like, it is one of the top horror films of the year for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would put it up there with Sinners. I don't know if I'm going to rate it quite as high as Sinners, but it's definitely in that conversation for me as far as that goes. I know some people are kind of taking the kind of slapsticky nature of the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie and kind of turning it into something that it's really not. Like, a lot of people, I've literally had two different people that went and saw me. It's like, I didn't know this film was a comedy. And my rebuttal was, it's not really a comedy.
I've seen a lot of people online saying that. It's a dark comedy more than horror. I mean, it's horror and it's got a little slapstick. But again, I feel that's his maybe perspective. Some people deal with death and horrific things in life with comedy.
I was like, did you watch Barbarian? Like, that was his other major movie. Like, it had some of those elements too, but I wouldn't consider Barbarian a comedy, like, by any stretch. And that's kind of the style that he has in his films. But yeah, man, like this had so many good, dark, twisted elements in this that like forces you to pay attention. And if you're willing to lose yourself emotionally in a story like this, it'll take you on a journey. Like, I really went on a full like emotional type journey where I was shocked and sickened a little bit and just horrified. And yeah, I laughed a little bit at some of the goofiness of the end of the film, but it didn't take away from the overall emotional punch that this movie was for me. And he just does such a good job of interweaving all of that. And I got a lot of enjoyment out of this too, for sure.
Yeah, so in the end, Weapons was a really solid horror film. It gets into the dark and disturbing. It tells its story in it's a way that we've seen before, but it does really well at breaking up into chapters to let us kind of sit and breathe with these characters for a while before we jump ahead to another character and we see everything in one. It's got a few issues. I've got a few issues with some of the plot points and things that it did, and a little bit with the slapstick. Like, it doesn't fully take away, but it does, like, okay, I just wasn't expecting that. But I'm giving this a solid 8.5. Like, I was kind of torn between 8.5 and a 9 because I did really enjoy it. I think he did a fantastic job, but those things that I'm kind of nitpicking on is going to have it sitting in the 8.5 for me.
Yeah, I'm giving it a solid 8.5 as well. That's exactly where I landed. And It's not a perfect movie. It's not perfect by any means, but it's still a really, really good, dark, twisted, sickening kind of horror film that if you allow yourself to lose yourself emotionally in it, I would agree. Like it goes dark. It punches you in the gut. If you have, a strong empathy for especially kids, man, especially with, Alex's story, like he was such a central figure once you got to the back half of the movie and dealing with his story. Like you really feel it then, and they do a good enough job of having you connect with each of these characters because it gives you time to kind of put yourself in their situations and kind of understand what they're going through and what happens to them. And it did a really good job of allowing these stories to semi-overlap while also pushing the narrative forward. So it's not retelling the exact same thing. It's like taking it and it's like, okay, this is where these two characters tie together. Now we're going to move it a little bit forward. And I really appreciated that style of storytelling. So for that, I'm giving it an 8.5. It's not without some little minor issues, but it didn't nitpick and take away my enjoyment out of this film at all. An absolutely fantastic horror film that I will watch again.
Yeah, so Weapons is in theaters now. Go check it out. It's well worth seeing in theaters for the creepiness, the effect, because I think I could feel the tension in the room with a lot of the stuff too. So if you go check it out, come to our socials, come to our Discord, come talk to us about it. We'd love to discuss this more because there is a lot of different layers and Easter eggs and like other things that almost when I rewatch it again, when it's on digital, that I want to really see if there's little hints of things or things that I just didn't catch, because there are some different layers that are kind of spread out throughout. But it was a very enjoyable horror movie and one of the best of the year.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely going to have it high on my list for a while. It's going into my, Halloween horror movie rotation for sure. It was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to dive back into it and check it out again for sure. It's always going to get a high, it's going to get a higher rating from me if I want to see it again and see it multiple times. This is absolutely one, and I'm going to want to go back and revisit again for sure.
And it's been on my brain because it was announced that Pedro Pascal was originally attached to this movie. And I'm trying to figure out, like, where would he really have fit? Because Zach said he had to basically recast the entire film after Pedro had to drop out, because I think it was for Fantastic Four, the 300 other projects he has going on. Like, was he going to be the dad?
I think so.
Was he going to be the principal? But this is one where it's kind of good that Pedro dropped out. I enjoy him as an actor and everything, but I think Josh and Benedict Wong, they did such a good job with those two characters. So that seemed like the main two that he potentially was going to be, unless maybe he was the cop as well. Like, there's really like 3 or 4 guys that he could have been in this film, but it kind of worked out well. Maybe not for him, but for the film, that they got the cast they did because that happened.
Yeah, I have a feeling if he was going to be anybody, if he was going to play that important of a role that you have to recast, I have a feeling it would have been Archer. It would have been, Matt's dad, played by Josh Brolin, who did a phenomenal job in this film. But since he was that crucial, because Josh Brolin does do a lot of heavy lifting throughout a good chunk of this film, I have a feeling if he was that important, it would have been him. But I could be wrong. But
or Pedro was going to be Gladys.
That would have been
out there.
Insane. Holy crap.
I think he would have really owned that if he did it. It would have been hysterical if he did it, but yeah.
That would have been crazy too. But yeah, what could have been, and it's another one of those what if castings, right? Like, what if he had been in it? How different would the movie have been? I don't know, but we got some phenomenal performances out of this for sure. But there's no easy way to transition into our next film because these are two completely diametrically opposed movies. But we have Freakier Friday, which is the follow-up to the Freaky Friday movie that starred Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis, and they are back in their roles as Tess and Anna in this film. And we get kind of a little bit of a modern-day update here where Anna is, a mom to Harper, who's played by Julia Butters in this, and she's getting married to Manny Jacinto's character, Eric. And that's kind of the central plot of this film, is just the merging of their two families. Manny Jacinto, I want to see him. I know you and I have talked about this before we recorded, but we just want to see him in more stuff, man. Manny Jacinto is an awesome actor. We loved him in The Good Place.
Yeah, I fell in love with him in The Good. He played that buffoon so well in there, but we've seen so many different layers from him now.
Yeah, I want to see him in more stuff. He was really good in this, and this is definitely leaning more into the campier, sillier type of family comedy films that we're kind of used to seeing. And you get those elements of, the body switching in the story and the lessons to be learned and all of that. And it gets kind of a modern update here. I want to hear what you thought about this film.
I'd say this was kind of a good palate cleanser after Weapons, because you kind of need something lighthearted and silly and over the top, because you kind of know going in, like Freaky Friday came out 22 years ago. Yep. It was a Disney movie. It's a Disney family film. It's going to be silly, absurd, over the top. It's not going to have the best of story all the time, but I had fun with him. I had fun with my girls on. I do think the second half is much better than the first.
Absolutely.
I think the first half was a little too much of just trying to cram everything in, and it wasn't until it really got into the heart and the soul of what they needed to be able to get back into their bodies that really let the actors shine.
Yeah.
And let Jamie Lee Curtis have a ton of fun playing a teenager again and stuff. But it was really nice to see. We know Lindsay Lohan has gone through a ton of stuff. Like, a lot of these child actors have had a rough go after their childhood is done in Hollywood and what Hollywood does to them. So it was nice to see her, back in a film and doing this again. I know she's done some more of the Hallmark type of films since then on Netflix. I call them the Hallmark type because that's what everyone knows. There's rom-com Christmas movies and stuff like that, but I actually had fun with it. Like I said, the second half is so much better. The first half is like, well, let's make some Gen X and Gen Z and Gen whatever jokes and make sure everyone knows that we're hip and cool and we know this and we know that and we can make this lingo and do that lingo and let's jam this in. And like, it was just trying to stuff a whole lot in at the beginning, but it did kind of let out some story items that I kind of like still wonder about afterwards, because we get that, Anna has a child now, but we don't really know. Like, it's just referred to as she decided to be a single mother. So there's no reference to a dad, or she did a surrogacy, or she did an artificial insemination, if she did anything like that. It was just kind of like she has a kid. Yeah. And it kind of just didn't set up any other story like that. And I'm like, well, there's avenues they could have gone with that, especially referring back to characters and things from the first film. But overall, I had an enjoyable time with it. It's silly and it's rough at times, but like I said, that second half kind of makes up for a lot of the rougher parts in the first half.
Yeah, this is a film that definitely doesn't take itself too seriously. Like, that's what I enjoyed about this one. Like you said, the word palate cleanser is apt, just comparing it to the movie that we just reviewed in Weapons. But yeah, this doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a lot of fun. You have, Lindsay Lohan's character is a big music manager now, and she's managing this artist, and, while also balancing the work life, the mom life, while also trying to get married. And that's kind of the central plot of the story is, them wanting to get married and either move to live where Eric is from, which is London. They want to either move to London or stay in Los Angeles. And you have you have the two different viewpoints of, Anna's daughter, Harper, wants to stay in L.A. Eric's daughter, Lily, wants to move to London, where she's trying to become, she wants to work in fashion. She wants to do this. She thinks she'd have a better chance of doing that in London versus L.A. And, that's kind of the back and forth. It's kind of the central plot of this whole film. And
the daughters don't get along at all. Like, they didn't know that their parents, because, sorry to jump in there, their parents met because they got into a big food fight with each other. And we jump into that Anna and Eric met during a parent-teacher conference with the principal over the food fight. And it kind of just, okay, well, now we're like 9 months later and they're about to or 6 months later and they're about to get married.
Yeah, and it doesn't explain how Eric necessarily got to L.A. to begin with, to have his daughter in there to consider.
Well, it did because he's opening a restaurant.
Sure, yeah, but they didn't spend that much time on it.
Yeah, they spent 5 minutes on kind of establishing the plot before it's like, all right, now let's switch.
Like, here's our excuse, and we kind of just deal with that. But it's very loose. That's what I mean by it. Yeah. But you have, obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is the overbearing doctor, grandma, psychiatrist who
podcaster,
which was very funny. That scene in particular was really funny. It made me laugh because I was like, I feel those issues, but she is very heavily trying to convince them to stay in LA because she wants the family close and all that stuff. And she does that job very, very well before the switch. And I agree. The second half of the film where it really takes off, where they get to the switch and they have to start, going and taking the story from there, is where it really kicks in. Because you could just tell Jamie Lee Curtis had to have an absolute blast making this movie because she, in my opinion, is the real shining part of this. You get, I think Harper does a fine job too. The Julia who plays Harper does a fine job when she's playing her mother, and kind of, everybody kind of does their own thing here, and it's fun to watch them kind of switch roles and have a good time with it. But those two in particular, I think, did probably the best job of anybody in this film. But man, it was just a ton of fun. It mixes in all the elements that you would want from this. You have the music element, you have the humor, you have the silliness, and like I said, it's not afraid to kind of just poke fun at itself and just, have some fun with it. And I think that was needed for this. Is it the best story in the world? Not necessarily, but I don't even think the plot was all that bad. The plot was fine. Like the
plot wasn't bad.
They do a fine job with it too. It's just I think sometimes they try a little too hard. Like I think the people that with the humor a little bit, and like you said, the whole old people trying to sound hip or older people trying to sound young, and how it comes across. And you could tell this movie was probably written by people in their 40s trying to sound like they were in their teens or 20s, which doesn't always connect. But like I still think it was fun. It had some funny moments. I was laughing at quite a bit of it too. Like it was a good time. I had a lot of fun. It was enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree. Jamie Lee Curtis just looked like she was having a ball the whole time. She got the most ridiculous stuff to do. Even Lindsay Lohan got a lot of ridiculous stuff to do when she went full bore into it. But I do believe Julia as Harper's, like you could see, especially at the end, you saw the posture and the way she spoke and the way she acted was very more mature and more grown up and everything. And she handled that really well, especially the more emotional scenes as it got, that felt like a genuine connection between those two. And yeah, there's some story elements that are just kind of thrown in there that doesn't fully connect. And I'm going to go a little spoilery with one character that it felt weird in the first movie and it felt weird in this movie, which is Chad Michael Murray comes back as Jake in this, but he's kind of just almost a glorified cameo. He's got more time than a standard cameo and stuff in it, but they continue a joke from the first film, which was, it's explained away in the first film that he kind of had the hots for Tess, for the grandma, for the mom, but it was because Anna was in her body, and then he learned that, his connection was really with her. But they decided to just bring that joke back to this, where he still got the hots for it. It just came across more creepy than anything to me. He's chasing cougars and everything else now, but it felt weird in the first movie, but then you kind of was okay with it by the end because you had that connection between Anna and Jake. And in this one, they just went, all right, we're just going to go full creepy with them. I don't know, that aspect didn't work for me. They could have done a whole lot more with Jake, especially since we did leave at the first that Anna and Jake were together. We bring back that they've, for whatever reason, things didn't work out. I thought one story element that they didn't touch on in the beginning was going to be highlighted with him towards the end, but nothing really happened. But he was just kind of creepy.
I was kind of waiting for a reveal that he would have been Harper's dad.
That's what I was alluding to.
I was waiting for it too, and that doesn't get explored in this, so that's not really a spoilery type of thing. But that was kind of me going into it. I was like, oh, she has a kid. Oh, it had to have been Chad Michael Murray because he's you've seen him in the trailer. He's coming back. Like, okay, he's going to be her dad, and he's going to have some kind of. And this is the way I was just kind of laying out the plot of the film in my mind. Like, he's going to be involved with, and he's going to kind of mess with them getting married or have some kind of involvement with, a little bit more with the plot than what he did, and that wasn't the case at all with this. Like he was, like you said, you kind of laid it out perfectly. But I was kind of expecting that element to be in the story, and we didn't get that. And I think it was a little bit of a potential missed opportunity. But I get it. You don't have to necessarily deal with the whole Harper's father element in this. Like, it's not really pertinent to the story. But they do kind of deal with like Lily's mom, which is why
that's what's weird.
Which is why I was surprised that they didn't like deal with like both ends and have kind of that duality of it, their shared bond, because they don't really dive into what happens with Harper's father, but they do spend a decent amount of time talking about Lily's mom and how Lily's mom was no longer around and all that stuff, and just Eric dealing with that heartbreak and being ready to find love again, and he finds it with her. They don't really dive into it that much, and I was kind of waiting to see if that was going to get explored, and it just quite frankly didn't. And I think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity if I wanted to nitpick a little bit, because I think you could have had them kind of trauma bonding in that way and kind of helping bring the two daughters together. But overall, it didn't take away anything from the film for me. I just think there was a little bit more meat on there that they could have gone into.
Yeah, it was odd because it plays a critical part to Lily's story about how she's feeling is because of her mom, and she feels that leaving London might be losing a piece of her mom. She doesn't want to talk about her mom because she feels like she's going to lose what she has left of her with that. But Harper's just like, there's no even idea of a dad. Like, there's just like Anna had a kid, but there's just no alluding to what happened because they kind of beat you over the head with it a little bit. Like, when you chose to be a single mom, when you chose to be a single mom, when you're a single mom, when you chose to be a single mom, it's like, okay, we get she's a single mom, but there still has to be a dad or a syringe or something within there that they didn't really allude to, which, I mean, in the end, it didn't play that big, but you got to think when a kid grows up without a dad that can play a part in their behavior and how they act. But it was more I mean, there's a great mother-daughter dynamic between them.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was just that oddity that you're spending a lot of time on that with Lily, but Harper just doesn't have anything because she's got the overbearing grandma, she's got her mom, which is enough. But their explanation for the dad and the family aspect on that side was just a little odd because I was alluding to it, but didn't say it out. I did expect Jake would have ended up being the dad. Like, maybe he didn't know, and they find out later or something, or he did know, and he tries to break stuff up. But as you mentioned early on, Manny, he's so much fun. He's doing an accent in here and being charming, but also a little... He gets a little drama almost at the end, like when at the rehearsal dinner when he breaks the glass and stuff, and you get to see the more dramatic. Like, he's a guy that Phil has a ton of range as an actor, and you're starting to see him get more and more roles. I want to see him leading roles and big films out there because he was the best thing about The Acolyte to us, and he was fantastic in The Good Place, and he's been a really good kind of character actor, and I really want to see him do more. There was a great dance sequence that he did in the movie that he just nails. Like, he's a solid, fun actor that can do the humor and then hit you with an emotional beat right after that, like, so well. Like, he's a really fantastic actor. I'm glad they had him be a part of this film because he played that guy who's like, all right, I'm going to be a little standoffish here. Like, you're dealing with your stuff. The wedding's coming up. I've got my restaurant. I've got this stuff. I'm going to let you all be your thing. But then when it came to, like, all right, there's fighting, there's everything else going on, it's time for me to, like, step in and do something. And he played that really well. Yeah,
I could see him being kind of this rom-com leading man. Like, I could see him at the front of these movies. He's a handsome guy. Like, he's a very good looking guy. He's funny. He's got the acting chops that we think could lend well to leading this, leading another rom-com movie that, hopefully he gets more opportunities. I don't want to necessarily pigeonhole him into a genre or anything. But
we also know he can do action from the fantastic lightsaber battles that he did.
Yeah, he could do it. He's got a ton of range, and I hope he gets a chance to see it show it moving forward, because I'm a big fan of his, especially like you said, he was one of the real standout performers from The Good Place for me. Like, he was one of my favorite characters on the show, and I'm really excited to see him kind of really take off here and hopefully just have more creative opportunities for him moving forward, because I'm just a big fan. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he was a ton of fun in it, even though most of it revolves around Anna and Tess with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, but they look like they fell right back into their relationship and their friendship and everything else, because I know Jamie Lee Curtis said that this film kind of came about because Lindsay Lohan just had her child and went over to visit Jamie Lee Curtis, and they took a picture and people put it out and like, oh, wait, are we getting another Freaky Friday? And it's like, okay, let's explore this and see what happens. But this was a fun little family film. You're not going in to have the deepest story and the most cohesive stuff. It makes a ton of jokes at our age and the mid-30s to early 40s and stuff, and also jokes at Jamie Lee Curtis's expense because she's talking about crevices in her face as, she's the teenager now, but why are there crevices in my face? And all, like, she just had a ton of fun, even like going through, what was it, Walgreens and grabbing, like, you go grab the essentials. What are essential senior needs? And she's looking and grabbing things, because I would say stay for the credits, because there is a kind of a blooper reel that airs at the beginning of the credits, which is a lot of fun. You get to see some of those scenes where they're just, it looked like they just had an absolute blast, and it did feel that way through the movie too. Like, so it looked like they just had a lot of fun. I'll say again that I do feel like the first half was the weakest part of it,
Sure.
as it set up. But once it really got into the switch, where they're finally starting to deal with the issues and getting to the heart of it. And even though I complained about Chad Michael Murray's character and stuff, that record store scene was a lot of fun because Jamie Lee Curtis is crawling along the ground. And what are you doing down there? I'm stretching. Or back in the back room, she's trying to get, I'm telling my body that I want to stand up, but it's not standing up.
I felt that.
I felt that.
I felt that spiritually, but yeah, they have a ton of fun with it, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. But in the end, Freakier Friday is a ton of fun. It's a family comedy that everybody can really relate to. It's a fun film. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The front half takes a little bit of setting up and kind of takes away from the overall quality of the movie, but the back half of the film is just a real fun joyride when they finally make the switch and start going through, like you said, some of the meatier elements of the story. I'm giving this a solid 7.5. For me, like, I had a ton of fun with this. The musical scene in particular towards the end, where, you know, they have the two switches and they tried to, you know, creatively work their way out of it to perform on a stage in front of people, was a lot of fun for me. I know we really didn't talk about that in the review, but I had a ton of fun with that. I'm giving it a 7.5. It's a lot of fun. There's some laughs. It tries a little bit too hard at sometimes, but I think that's part of the charm of the film, and it worked for me. It was a very worthy follow-up to a sequel to a movie that I really enjoyed when it came out 22 years ago, and I'm happy to see the updated version of this. Give Manny Jacinto more roles, please. I want to see him in a lot more stuff, but I had a lot of fun with it, so I'm giving it a 7.5.
Well, Josh stole exactly what I was going to say, so I don't have a lot more to add to that because I agree with everything. Like, Manny was fantastic. I really love that. There was a lot of jokes for our generation, for the new generation. Again, as you said earlier in the review, it did sound like probably someone in their 40s or 50s tried to write a lot of the Gen Z jokes and everything else. It didn't. The first half didn't work as well for me. It was the second half when it really got into the heart and the soul of this story. There were some genuine emotions, some genuine laughs, and I think they all did really well. It was really good to see Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis back as these characters, because a lot of times when you've gone this long to bring something back after 22 years, it can feel a little rough or off, but I think they did a solid job of bringing it back. It has a lot of beats and elements from the first, but it does enough of its own thing to make it kind of more unique and make it a solid sequel. Like, it ends in a very similar way that the first one did, but it was a lot of fun. I'm giving it a 7.5 as well. And that, as I always do with family films, my girls absolutely loved it. They had a ton of fun with it. We watched the first Freaky Friday about a week before we went and saw this one because they saw the trailer and like, hey, we want to go see that. We'll watch the first one first so you know the whole story, and then we'll go in. But they had a blast, so that gets an extra, point in there. But 7.5 is solid for this. Like, it's a Disney family movie, and you got to know kind of what that is. That's a genre in itself as a Disney family film. It's got some corny cheesiness to it. It's got some rough parts to it, but overall, especially with how it nailed the ending, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a blast, and I know we saw this film separately. Like, you went and saw it with your family, I went and saw it by myself, but I was impressed with the kind of diverse age range of the theater audience that I went into, because there was a group of older people that came in and saw it, probably drawn in by Jamie Lee Curtis and the love for her, but there were also teenagers, there were also families. Like, it was kind of a good eclectic group of people in the theater for mine, which is a hallmark of a good family movie. Like, it appeals to multiple generations and multiple different groups of people that wanted to check it out. So I had a lot of fun in the theaters. Freakier Friday is in theaters now. Go see it, check it out, watch it with your family, watch it by yourself. Like, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this. I think it's a fun movie. Like I said, sometimes it tries a little too hard, but it's still a fun movie that is definitely worth a watch for sure. Go check it out. Come to our socials and let us know what you think. I'm excited to talk about this movie with people too, because it had some really fun elements. Like I said, this is the Manny Jacinto love episode. Like, love that guy. Hope he's in more stuff, and it was a lot of fun.
You had to laugh because our theater age range was like 6 months to like 70 to 80, which I gotta say, like, as a parent, I know it can be hard to go out and do stuff and do films without the kids and stuff, but don't bring a baby to a movie theater. We had multiple babies in there, and all they did was scream and cry and yell, and the parents didn't do anything about it. Like, I know it's hard, but don't take your baby to the movie theater. It's not a place for them. It's extremely loud. It's dark. You hope that they're going to sleep. They're not going to sleep when it's that loud. Don't take babies to movie theaters. If you can't make it work without them, honestly, you should just wait until it comes out on digital or just figure out something. But we just had screaming babies all throughout the movie.
That's rough. Also, make a point to be known, Brad is anti-baby. The dad here is no, I'm just kidding. No. Just kidding. But yeah, that makes a movie theater experience very frustrating for sure. Like, we've been pretty fortunate, and I'm gonna knock on wood a little bit when I say it. Like, we've been pretty fortunate for quite a few of the movies we've gone to recently that the audience has been significantly better about the whole, not talking loud during films and going too crazy. Like, we've been pretty lucky here lately. We're usually those, like, it's been a while since we've had to go on a real, rant about theater etiquette, and I've been pretty fortunate for that. But yeah, it sucks that you had to deal with that when you went and saw this movie. But yeah, don't bring your tiny babies to a theater experience like that. It benefits nobody, and I get you want to see it, but try to think a little bit about the audience around you too, and like, if you can't go, that's unfortunate, but yeah, it's not the best place for tiny babies,
especially opening weekend. Like, try to find maybe during the week or a follow-up weekend or something when there's not going to be as many people.
Maybe,
but still, don't take your babies to theaters.
That's hard. It's movies are for everybody. I completely agree with that, but like, it makes it rough for everybody when they're that little, and they need your attention so much that it's hard for.
And this was almost a 2-hour movie as well, so a little baby, especially, like, we had one that was old enough to walk, and also old enough to scream. They just let it kind of run around to try to burn out some. So they had multiple kids, one that was a little older than the baby, just running around screaming, and then the baby screaming as well. It's like, I get it's hard to find because not everyone has family or friends or people that can help watch their kids for them and stuff, but you got to find something, or at least have some thought about other people, that if your kid is screaming that much, that one of you walks out of the theater, because there was 2 parents there. One of them's got to leave the theater with the child and calm them down, and not just allow them to scream for 5-10 minutes before you get up and take them out. Like, family films, I can be more lenient, because we did have some talkers as well. I can be a little more lenient on family films because it's hard to keep kids from talking, and my girls have been great about that since they were young, because every time we went to theaters, I'm like, all right, once the movie starts, there's no talking. We don't speak during movies. But when they're under 1 or under 2, they really don't belong in the theater. Like, I'm not trying to be that guy, but it's just like, when they're screaming the entire time, you're ruining your own experience, you're ruining everyone else's experience, and it just makes it rough for everybody.
It's tough, man. There's no easy way about it. Just, we're big on thinking of other people and their experience in it as well, because it might cost a lot for you to get your family out of the house into a movie theater like that, but it's also expensive for everybody else. So I hope people are more cognizant of that moving forward, for sure.
Yeah. Well, this was definitely an interesting week, I found, because going from Weapons to Freakier Friday, like I said, it worked out because I needed that palate cleanse after Weapons, because it was that dark, that disturbing, and that got you. And then it's like, all right, fun family film. That then also may have helped my enjoyment with Freakier Friday, because I had something that was so deep and dark and disturbing. Like, all right, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy whatever they throw at me, because I just watched something like Weapons.
Yeah, for sure. And you said these couldn't be 2 more diametrically opposed type of films, but I love and appreciate all genres of film, and this is one week that I love having the 2 stark contrasts, because if it's reviewing 2 of the same thing, you could blur, and one could hinder your experience of enjoying the other. If one's really high quality and the other's slightly lesser, it could hinder your enjoyment for something. So I like when we have these 2 very, very vastly different films that we can come on and talk about. And I love when it lines up like that, and hopefully, we'll have some more movies lining up like that coming up the rest of the year, and I'm looking forward to a lot of the stuff we have on deck.
But that's all we have for you today. Coming up next week, we're going to be reviewing Nobody 2 and Marvel Animation's Eyes of Wakanda. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.